would like to request him to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Mr. Utpal Chatterjee. We are extremely delighted to listen to him. So please come on the dais.
My erstwhile pupil and now my very good friend Suranjan. At a time when I taught you, I taught there for about 3.5 years, but before me there was another celebrated Utpal Doctor, who also taught English very well indeed. Dr. Tagore, but for you I would not be here today. You are charmingly persuasive. I've been asked, and I'm, of course, sitting in front of so many friends and so many celebrities, right from the front row, people sitting on the right, people behind me, and all of you know so much about Rabindranath, but arguably more than I do. When Jadavpur asked me to speak on Rabindranath, like anybody, I decided to do a little bit of homework to make sure I don't make you laugh for the wrong reasons. Now, to begin at the very beginning, and I'll try to make this very brief, we all know that Rabindranath was no ordinary child. We know he was a reluctant, as Shakespeare put it in Act 2, Scene 7, as you like it, the whining schoolboy with the satchel unwillingly to school. And that was in 7 Ages of Man, Melancholy Jaques, to be more precise. Now, Rabindranath would not go to school. In fact, all of us probably were reluctant schoolgoers the first day or second day. And at some point we were persuaded to be at school, and we loved school. But he was no ordinary man. Eventually we know his father realized what his son was all about. He was unusual, he was different. So they decided he would not be in any rigid curriculum. Let things be flexible. He was a keen observer. He would come out with amazing comments, thanks to his observations. And there came a time when he was inspired enough to write. His first publication came out, I think, when he was age 12. Well, like most aristocratic Bengali families, his family too wanted to send the son to England to study and become a barrister. Well, so many people have gone, some have returned briefless barristers. We're not talking about them. But Rabindranath was bored in the few law classes that he attended. So he took to English literature. And why did he take to English? When he loved his mother tongue so much, and Suranjan very rightly spoke in Bengali, because that was the language that the world did not know. And they had to bank on translations. We'll come to that a little later, although I promised to make this relatively brief. Well, he decided to take up English not merely to read the foremost, the best of English authors, poets, playwrights, a playwright like William Shakespeare, for instance. But he also wanted to read so many foreign writers whose works have been translated so promptly, unlike Tagore, when he started writing for the rest of the world. The fact remained, the rest, as we know, is history. The greatest thing that happened to him abroad, arguably, I'm cutting a lot of things out, because you've got other programs to accommodate. He met William Butler Yeats, an Irishman, who got the Nobel Prize 6 years after he did. But Yeats was a person who was regarded, respected so very much. And whether you like it or you don't, his English was obviously very good. Rabindranath's was. He wrote the entire Gitanjali in English himself. And that translation was something that put Yeats in a daze. He had to read it again and again. He spent the day and the night reading it through and through and through. And then he realized he decided to confide in a few. And then finally, the two of them, when they would sit and talk late into the night, they would do it in the presence of a certain photographer who was in great demand. His name was Rothenstein. And Rothenstein was a person Yeats banged on. Rabindranath never asked Yeats to send it to the Academy, the Swedish Academy. No, he never did. Rabindranath was not made of that metal or that kind. So what happened? Rothenstein did deliver it to the Swedish Academy. And you had people like Anatole France and Thomas Hardy, all of them breathing down Tagore's neck as far as the choice of the prize was concerned. In 1913, he did get the Nobel Prize. There are two kinds of reaction. Gitanjali was released in Kolkata 4 years before the Nobel Committee took notice of it. But there was no, as Suranjan would put it, Shara Shabdo here. Because as in Bengali, there is a saying, Geo Jogi Bhikke Paye Na. So nobody took notice of, in fact, nobody took notice of Pathet Pachali when it was released first in the Academy of Fine Arts. But only when the people, the audience in Cannes, rose and gave it a standing ovation, well, the queue never ended in front of Academy of Fine Arts. It is your Geo Jogi not getting the bouquet. An ideal instance. Well, in the case of Rabindranath, he was going to Shialda railway station and somebody thrust a white piece of paper, somebody from the telegraph office. And when he did, Rabindranath didn't have a time. He was in a rush. He just said, "Sir, please read it. Urgent, urgent. Read it. From England. Read it." England? Actually, it had come from Sweden. Finally, when he was persuaded to read it, he just saw one thing. You are the recipient of the Nobel in Literature. Wire acceptance to Prime Minister. That's what the telegram read. So, Rabindranath did precisely that. But by that time, the word had gone like wildfire all across Bengal. And so many people claiming to be so close to Rabindranath started writing all kinds of congratulations. If somebody sent the Abhinandan, somebody had sent the Mubarak, or some plain and simple sent him congratulations. And he replied to each and every of them till he got tired. And then he had to cyclo-style. In fact, when Yeats congratulated him, he sent the cyclo-style sheet to Yeats. Poor Yeats. That's the irony, Rita. Well, Yeats was very happy. He congratulated him again. He said, "Come here, write, not for the Nobel this time, but for the rest of the world." And how to the rest of the world? Suranjan just spoke of internationalism in the present context and what Tagore's stake would have been. Now let me tell you what the rest of the world did, ladies and gentlemen. They abhorred Rabindranath. Why? They had not read a single word of Gitanjali. Not a single word. It was not just love of God, of humanism. It was also pantheism that we know Wordsworth to be famous for. pantheism, finding love for God in nature, finding the love for universe in everything that you see around you. That was also Rabindranath, his version of religion. That is why he was so concerned about environment long before it became the issue it has become today. Well, they wrote everything, right? In the United States, right from the East Coast, talking of the New York Times, to the West Coast, talking of the Los Angeles Times. What did they write? I'm ashamed of people who claim to be journalists. They not only abused and insulted, they did everything else. Why? Because Rabindranath was the first non-European and the first non-white to be the recipient of the Nobel Prize in Literature. The color made all the difference, not the content. They did not read a single line, single word. Oh, they did not even want to find out what Gitanjali meant. Such was their thirst, their appetite for knowledge, and such was the output of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, Rabindranath, trust him to act as mature as he could. After all, don't forget, he was disconsolate after he lost his two children, his parents, his father, and his wife. He was disconsolate for a very long time. He came out of it even more mature and decided to be as friendly as possible to put his message across. Suranjan used a certain term, and the term was, if I recall correctly, Suranjan, rural reconstruction. Do you remember, if there were people who claimed to love India very much and had gone to prison to prove it, in fact, I remember in the 70s and 60s, if people died, there used to be a little, if there was an obituary at all in the main newspapers, there would be a line saying, Uni Shadhinota Sangrami Chilen. Uni Jeleo Gichlen. So somebody came and asked me if anybody went to jail around that time, was he a Shadhinota Sangrami? I said, please ask the people concerned and ask their relations. I can't answer for them. But everybody who was in jail was not a Shadhinota Sangrami, and every Shadhinota Sangrami did not deserve to go to jail. Rabindranath did not, but that did not make him any less a lover of India, as were the main dramatis personae. Gandhi came to Shantiniketan. He was called Mahatma by none other than Rabindranath. Nehru came, and they started coming quite often because Rabindranath was a very broad-minded person, and he wanted to give practical ideas. He had traveled, as Suranjan put you across, his travel schedule. He had done the length and breadth of the US. He had gone to Europe. He had gone everywhere. What did he do? When he came back with the Nobel money, his father was the person who bought that entire land. But with the Nobel money, he set up the university. And adjacent to Shantiniketan is Sreelekha. And Sreelekha was the place where he put up the whole plan, the entire desk work for rural reconstruction and reforms and the prospective changes. The first change he wanted, a change in a very big way, was to ensure that the urban India, the education system was changed from the colonial system to a system that he incorporated in Viswabharati, bringing in the best of the West and the East. In fact, when Satyajit Ray, who is known to be a person who was blessed with creative imagination and a perfectionist, was asked by the Guardian of London, what was it that made him ever so thirsty for perfection, ever so thirsty for getting just the right frame? What made him such a good screenplay writer? What was it that made him go and compose the music for his own film after Ravi Shankar did it for Pather Pachali? Ravi Shankar, your Satyajit Ray answered, very briefly. He said, till I went to 3 years changed my life. There was one man, meaning Rabindranath, and the Vishwabharati of the one that Rabindranath had planned. I'm not talking of the present state of Vishwabharati. Please forgive me. Now, suffice it to say, Rita, there is no difference between Bhagalpur University and Vishwabharati, as matters stand.
I agree.
Now,
Even Bhagalpur is better.
arguably, yes. There are some very good professors in the English department there.
I know of that.
Now, we are talking about the university. Satyajit Ray said, you have the best of East and West. Dr. Ghosh had said at the very outset when he was introducing his publishing house, he had talked of the osmosis of the East and the West. Did you not? If I have quoted you correctly. Well, this was a perfect osmosis that so many contemporaries of Satyajit Ray and Satyajit Ray himself benefited from. He would leave nothing to chance. He always aimed for the right thing, for the perfect thing. Therefore, his thirst was inexhaustible. Just like Rabindranath's output, the amount he produced in terms of quantity and quality was like Arjun's, not my friend Arjun sitting here, but Arjun of Mahabharata, Arjun's inexhaustible quiver. In fact, again in Shialda, when he was rushing in all the crowd, there was a little girl, tiny girl, looking at him in awe, with awe, thrusting a little white paper, ostensibly for an autograph. And what did Rabindranath do? He asked, "Tumhara naam ki?" And the girl looking at him, looking this way and that way, surprised he had asked a question. Man told him her name. He said, "Bah." And then he wrote not just his name, he wrote 3 lines. Ladies and gentlemen, those 3 lines are framed today because those 3 lines were so short, so simple, so sweet, yet so profound. And then he wrote his full name, Rabindranath Tagore. This was Rabindranath. But the last thing that I would like to say before concluding, Rabindranath was a person who believed all men were created equal. Everyone. That is why you will find he was not one to raise his voice. He was not one to call hundreds and thousands of students to block the road in a protest march. He wrote his own protests. Take 2 of his dance dramas or music plays. Take Chandalika, take Tashed Desh. These were his form of protesting. Chandalika was all about people being created equal. And the protagonist was Anando, who was a Buddhist monk. Now that is the way he went about it. But he told and taught, he was promised by Nehru and by Gandhi that his suggested or proposed form of education would be the education that would be incorporated in the independent India. They did not keep their word. About the rural reconstruction, we all know how poor our country is as far as the rural sector is concerned. Even today, 68% of India is in dire straits. We all know that. Indian economy is doing very well. Our foreign exchange reserves are very high, but the fact remains we are very poor. So he wanted to ensure this would happen. What happened? Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, with all respect to him, may his soul rest in peace, continue resting in peace. What did he do? He decided to call Ford, asked him to spare at least $50 million And with those $50 million, asked them to look after 1,500 villages. The Ford people gave up after 6 months here. So it was back to square one. And Rabindranath's hard-earned, if I may say so, thesis, research, the do's, the don'ts, everything was put in a shelf as if they belonged to a museum. In Jadavpur, in 3 other universities, they have got a few texts to remind you that this was written. But talking of internationalism, ladies and gentlemen, and conclude with only one tiny quote of somebody Rabindranath would have loved to meet. The late Martin Luther King Jr., who championed the civil rights movement in the United States and who died not too long after John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated on the 22nd of November, 1962. King said, this is just a 2-line quote. In his I Have a Dream speech before more than 1 million crowd, he said, I have a dream. I have a dream that one day my daughter would be judged not by the color of her skin, but by the strength of her character. I have a dream. I too have a dream that all that Rabindranath dreamt of would, by the people concerned in Delhi or anywhere in the country, decide to incorporate it and decide with the will of the people to make it come true and make India the place of pride as Rabindranath always wanted it to be. May that dream be fulfilled. To all the people, gentlemen, including Suranjan sitting here, to you, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much to each and every one of you for lending me your ears. Thank you.